Story 1. One time I set my phone down on my bed, turned around for a moment, and it was gone. I searched everywhere and tore the room apart. I gave up. An hour later, it was right there on the bed where I left it. No one else was home. Still haunts me. Story 2. I have a psychotic disorder and sometimes it can be severe. 2 years ago, I walked out of my house in a densely populated neighborhood. There was a person standing in my driveway. They looked at me for a couple of seconds, then walked down my driveway and into a van. None of my neighbors said anything, and I never saw the person or the van again. To this day, I have no idea if it was just a hallucination. Story 3. I wrote 90 lines of C++ code, and it compiled the first time. This was before editors had syntax checking, so that should never happen. I thought the compiler was broken because if it compiles, it doesn't provide any error messages. I spent about 10 minutes trying to figure out what was wrong. Story 4. I received song lyrics from a Ouija board once. I know I did not write them, and I am certain my friend did not do it. I do not consider myself someone who believes in the supernatural, but I have never been able to explain how it happened. Story 5. I used to frequently experience what I call reverse déjà vu. It's difficult to explain, but I would imagine what was about to happen in real life right before it occurred. I've even been able to tell people out loud what was about to happen just seconds before it happened. Very strange and unpredictable events occurred. For example, I envisioned a person in front of me in class stealing a bag from someone nearby and then saying the exact words they were about to say. I watched how the other person reacted and what they said, word for word. Then I heard the bell ring and someone next to me say something else. Moments later, all of that happened right in front of my eyes. I used to experience these strange reverse déjà vu moments quite often, but I haven't had one in a couple of months. I realized it wasn't normal when I tried explaining it to a friend and asked if they had experienced it or if it was what people meant when they talked about déjà vu. They said no, it sounded more like being psychic or déjà vu in reverse. I am still confused by it, but it gives me the same sensation in my brain that déjà vu does, so I refer to it similarly. Has anyone else ever experienced this? People who have witnessed it are always shocked and ask me about it. I wonder if I should tell my doctor about it. Story 6. I watched water. I didn't believe in it until I actually did it. I remain skeptical because of what I have read about it. But something was attracting the farthest end of the forked stick downward with such force that the bark came off in my hands as it twisted. Story 7. One night, I was lying in bed when I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my chest, and my vision went black for a moment. I sat up, waiting for it to happen again, but it didn't, and I felt fine afterward. It has never happened since. Story 8. I was driving home late from my boyfriend's, which is about a 20-minute drive for me. The entire time I felt a bad feeling and a lot of anxiety. A voice in the back of my head told me I needed to get home as fast as I could, but I couldn't explain why. When I finally got home, I felt relieved, but just as I was about to open my door, I heard a voice yell, "Help me." I turned around because someone had yelled and, of course, that made me turn around, but I also wondered if I was just hearing things. The voice sounded off, almost not human, and whoever yelled it spoke in a monotone and nonchalant manner, which are not normal behaviors if someone actually needed help. I heard it again the exact same way, and suddenly a bunch of dogs started barking. While that might not sound strange, it was odd because they all started barking at once, rather than one after another. I heard, "Help me," the same way 2 more times before I turned around and went inside my house. I could still hear it at the same volume even after I got inside, and no matter where I was in the house, I could still hear it just as loud and in the same manner. I have no explanation for it, and I get chills every time I think about it. Story 9. One evening, I walked into my living room to find all my cat toys perfectly arranged in a circle, like some sort of feline ritual. Neither Janice nor Berlin took the blame. Still baffles me. Story 10. When I was a child, if I had been on my trampoline during the day, at night while I was in bed, I always felt like I was back on my trampoline, bouncing up and down. Story 11. I'll go first. One night, I had what I can only describe as a full-on astral projection experience. I was lying in bed, completely awake, when suddenly I felt my body get lighter, as if I was floating. The next thing I knew, I was hovering above myself, looking down at my own body. It wasn't like a dream, it felt real. I could even see my room exactly as it was, down to the smallest details. The craziest part? I started moving, as if I was being pulled somewhere. I don't know where I was going, but right before I got too far, I panicked and snapped back into my body. I woke up instantly, heart racing, feeling like I had just fallen from somewhere high. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I still have no idea what actually happened. Story 12. I talked to my deceased father and sister for a year, most nights, when I had to move into my grandparents' house. They communicated with me in dreams. I refer to them as dreams, but they felt real, and once we moved, I never had another. My father mentioned that while growing up, his house was haunted. Story 13. I went to get acupuncture done for the first time and had some body adjustments to different parts because my back and neck chronically hurt. Sometimes, if they work on too many areas, the body can become confused about which parts to repair, and I was in pain afterward. I thought I was all set for a midterm later that day, which was online due to COVID-19. However, once I started, I realized that I knew all the technical concepts, but I forgot one crucial thing. I couldn't remember how to type at all. For the first time since learning to type decades ago, I had to look down at the keyboard and locate the keys visually. I had completely forgotten how to type. I couldn't ask my professor for more time because that seemed like such a bizarre excuse that nobody would believe. Story 14. Sleep paralysis occurs when you wake up during sleep but are unable to move. What is it called when you are awake and moving but still dreaming? This happened to me when I was sick. I woke up, stood up to go to the bathroom, and saw a vaguely human figure in the corner of the room looking at me, resembling a distorted witch. I experienced a feeling of dread in my stomach similar to what one feels during a nightmare. I had my phone in hand and went to take a picture, though I'm not sure why. It made perfect sense at the time. However, the creature did not appear on the screen. It was just a normal corner of the room. Then things changed suddenly. The light shifted, and I was still standing with my phone, with no creature and no dread, just a feeling of confusion about what had just happened. Story 15. Between 14 and 18 years of age, I lived in a house where I always felt something watching me. I often saw a person-shaped shadow standing in the hallway that would disappear almost as soon as I saw it. It freaked me out the entire time I lived there, and I have never felt or seen anything like it since. Story 16. Not me, but my aunt. When she was born, she had failure to thrive. Doctors couldn't figure it out, and my grandmother was at her wit's end and terrified that she would die. My grandmother practiced Santeria, as she was from Cuba, so she took my aunt to her spiritual guide and asked for help. He told my grandmother that the spirit of a deceased woman was trying to claim my aunt as her own child, and that she would die unless they could break her free. The spiritual guide had them come back the next day, and he and another practitioner performed an elaborate cleansing ritual that included an animal sacrifice. At the end, they told my grandmother that the spirit was gone and my aunt would be okay, but that she would always be sickly and small because of her early connection to the dead. Apparently, my aunt started to improve almost instantly, and by the end of that week, she had finally begun to gain weight and grow appropriately. However, she has indeed always been the smallest in her entire family, deathly pale, and has remained quite sickly even to this day. Story 17. I was body-checked by something while in one of the upstairs suites at the Myrtles Hotel. I was turning around after taking a picture and saw a low shadow move towards me so fast that I jumped to get out of the way. I felt a splash of water and screamed. My girlfriends thought I was joking at first, but they quickly realized I was frozen in place and crying so hard that I couldn't speak. I was shaking with sobs. Felt like a wall of sadness had hit me. They got me outside and calmed me down. All I could say was, this was their home. They lost people they loved. It's not fun and games. My clothes were dry. There was no water anywhere. We all looked at our phones to see if anything was strange in the pictures from the tour we had taken earlier. The last 3 of mine looked totally black. When zoomed in, it appeared as if I were trying to look through a black piece of lace. I tried to find another hotel nearby, but there was no luck. We piled into one queen bed with the lights on and talked ourselves to sleep. I've had one other strange experience, but it was a happy one. This was crazy. I haven't looked at the pictures since. Another friend told me I should delete them right away, but that scared me even more. Story 18. One time, I had a dream about a conversation with a friend I hadn't seen in years. The next day, they called me unexpectedly, and we had the exact conversation from my dream, word for word. Still freaks me out to this day. What is your weirdest experience? Story 19. I lost my television remote. I looked everywhere and finally gave up. 2 hours later, it was sitting perfectly in the middle of my bed, as if it had been placed there by a ghost. Story 20. I have a vivid memory of being quite young, around 3 or 4 years old, which may be my first or second memory. I was at a family friend's house with my father. I wandered around the neighborhood until a random lady with dirty blonde hair, wearing a black t-shirt, picked me up in her black sports car. Eventually, my father found me, picked me up, and took me home. He seemed very calm, as if he knew the lady. Years later, when I asked my father about it, he had no memory of the event, and my mother had no recollection of hearing about it. It's entirely possible that I was just dreaming, but my father tends to be deceptive, so I've always thought it's just as likely he never told my mother and gaslight me when I got old enough to question him. Story 21. Mine is going to be anticlimactic compared to most here. I used to be a disc jockey and I had several lights, including a strobe light. One night, in my basement, one of my strobe lights flashed for a moment. It was not plugged in. I had used it that night to test some things, but then had unplugged it. I'm sure there's a scientific explanation for why it happened. I just don't know what it is, and it freaked me out because things that aren't plugged in aren't supposed to operate. Story 22. Recently, I was flying back home. The plane landed, and I disembarked. I was seated in the middle front. After walking to the side to tie my shoe, I proceeded to baggage claim, stopping at the bathroom along the way. I was walking quickly. When I reached baggage claim, all the bags were gone. All the passengers had retrieved their bags and left. My bags never arrived. They were on a different plane. I do not understand how the entire plane got to baggage claim before I did, how the baggage started loading before I arrived, and how everyone else had collected their bags and left before I even got there. I am truly astonished. Story 23. Just this past week, I generated a new car key. I was walking towards my car while holding my keys when I heard something fall. I picked it up and discovered it was an exact copy of my car key. At first, I thought it had just fallen off the key ring, but my original key was still attached. Story 24. I saw some red orb unidentified flying objects fairly close. I was camping in the bush with a friend. I'm not saying they were alien crafts, but they were completely unlike anything I have ever seen, unexplainable, and moved intelligently. Story 25. There was one class in my senior year of high school in a particular room where every single day I fell asleep within minutes. It wasn't that I got sleepy and put my head down. I would only realize it had happened when I woke up. One day, I tried sitting up as straight as possible and holding my pencil while keeping my eyes on the teacher. And suddenly I was waking up as the bell rang. I had to drop the class for a study hall because it was seriously hurting my grade point average. I did not fall asleep in study hall. It was almost like I fainted or something, and it never happened anywhere else, even when I was very sleepy. I'd say it was something environmental, but no one else in the class fell asleep like that. Story 26. One time when I was pregnant, I ran out of gas and was stuck at a traffic light. Suddenly, after about 15 minutes, a man walked up to my car with a red gas can. He opened my tank, poured in the gas, waved, smiled, and walked away. He never spoke to me at all. I don't know how he knew I was out of gas. It could have been anything. I tried to pull around to say thank you once I turned my car on, but I couldn't find him. Story 27. Some friends and I went camping one weekend. We were all drinking at night, and eventually everyone went to sleep in their own tents. When I woke up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, I noticed I had a condom hanging out of my body. I never mentioned it to my camping friends. Story 28. I woke up from my dream, got up, and did my morning routine. I repeated this routine 7 times before I actually woke up. Story 29. One time when I was in the 6th grade, I was in the living room with my dogs. I was looking out the window when suddenly I heard something that sounded like a whisper in my ear saying, "Run." Then my dogs started barking like crazy, even the one that rarely barks. I was freaked out and my parents said I was crazy. To this day, I am horrified by that moment, and it makes me paranoid every time I am reminded of it. Story 30. I once saw a dark figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat after feeling like I was being watched. I turned around, and it was just standing there, looking at me in the middle of an old Mason's campground. I didn't want to look away, but when I did, the person I was talking to said, "I saw it too. There was a dark shape behind you. It was just gone." I experienced something similar a year before, only it was child-shaped and sitting in a chair under an awning. Story 31. One time I was walking home and I swear I heard someone whisper my name, but nobody was around. It freaked me out. I turned around several times and still saw no one. It definitely felt like a glitch in the Matrix. Story 32. I was around 8 or 9 years old, playing with a car set that had 2 levels and an elevator. If you raised the elevator all the way to the top, the car would exit and go down the ramp. One particular morning at my great-grandmother's house, I set it up as usual, planning to have one car hit another car that I had placed about 6 inches from the ramp. The car went down the ramp as expected, exited the ramp, but inexplicably went skiing, balancing on 2 wheels on either side. It went around the car it was supposed to hit, landed back on all 4 wheels, and continued for another couple of feet before it stopped. I immediately put everything away, scared out of my mind. An hour later, I took it all out again and tried for who knows how long to recreate it, using the same cars, but it never even came close to happening again. Story 33. In sharing my dreams with others, I find that my dreams are notably clear and detailed. They are often as vivid as the scenes from a recently watched movie when I wake up, and I usually observe what unfolds. When I was 19, I dreamed that my friend was attending a training event across the country and unexpectedly encountered an ex from high school named Teddy. It was as vivid as day when they met in a large hotel conference room and awkwardly conversed. She was indeed at a training, which I already knew. When she returned, she exclaimed, "Oh my God, you will never believe what happened." To which I replied, "You ran into Teddy." She had and was quite startled that I knew. Though we lost touch many years ago, I will always remember that experience. I don't necessarily believe in the supernatural, spiritual, or religious, but this event was undeniably inexplicable. Story 34. For a year and a half, I worked in a thrift store. Most often, my job was managing the donation center. When people came to drop off donations, I would help them unload their cars and then sort their items into our various bins. We closed at 9 p.m. Most nights, there were very few customers after about 7 p.m., but someone still had to be around to help the occasional visitor. So by about 7 p.m., the staff for the rest of the night usually consisted of 2 cashiers at the front, 1 manager who spent most of their time in the office, and 1 person at the donation door. The door where people dropped off their items was an automatic sliding double-glass door, often seen at the entrance to businesses. On nights when I was closing, it was not uncommon for that door to randomly open and close, even though I could not see anything that could have tripped the sensor. There was also a system that detected cars pulling up to the door and played a chime sound through the backroom speaker system to let me know when I needed to stop whatever busy work I was doing to help customers. During the evenings, the chime would sound even when no cars were near the sensor. There was a phone on the wall right by the donation door. It would ring, and when I answered, there was nobody on the other end. None of those oddities ever occurred during daylight hours. I once mentioned it to one of my coworkers, expecting him to think I was crazy, but he said he had experienced the same during his share of solo closing shifts. I am not normally one to believe in such things, but given how many people stopped by and told me their donations were the result of cleaning out a recently deceased relative's home, I have no explanation other than that there were ghosts in that place. Story 35. I have a few experiences. Once, as a preteen, I thought I saw a ghost. I told it, I'm not afraid of you. You aren't real. I flipped on the light, and every light in the house went out at that moment. I fainted. All the lights were on when I woke up. I was extremely creeped out, but there was no ghost anymore. Story 36. I once dreamed that I found a $20 bill in my jacket pocket. I woke up, checked the pocket, and there was actually a $20 bill there. I have no idea how it got there, but I felt like I glitched the system. Story 37. I can do it when I am falling asleep sometimes, not like on command, but it is really strange. Since I watch people drawing to fall asleep on the laptop, I get a visual clock of sorts, so I know roughly how much time has passed. So when I am nodding off, I suddenly come back and get a rush of information, like an entire 2-hour movie's worth of experience that just happened to me. Yet it was barely 30 seconds of real time. It feels like my brain is launched out of a cannon and then caught by a net to slow down. Story 38. This may be unbelievable, but when I was around 4 or 5, I had a house with a swing set in the backyard. I was swinging and jumped off, but I didn't hit the ground. Instead, I hovered a few inches above the ground. I still have no idea why or how this happened. Story 39. I went to bed one night as usual. Around 3 a.m., I found myself sitting on my bed, remote in hand, hair undone, and the TV turned on. Took me some time to realize that it was me. I scared myself a little, and I am still unclear on how it happened. Story 40. I was at work one afternoon when someone called my office phone asking to speak to my father. My father had been deceased for 5 years. Story 41. I've had many unusual experiences in my life, but one time I was on the phone with my mom, describing experiences I had with a psychic medium. I talked for quite a while, feeling very philosophical, while my mom quietly listened. Then, someone else entirely answered me. She sounded older and was black, while we are white. I was so confused as to why I was suddenly on the phone with someone else who was silently listening to me ramble about connecting with the other side. I apologized and explained, but I can't remember what the lady said, only that she seemed pretty nonchalant about it. I have no explanation to this day. Story 42. Lucky at slots. I accrued $865 the first time and $100 on one pull a year later. I'm conservative with gambling, so I take my winnings and go. Story 43. When I was 5, a tricycle fell from a tree and hit me on the head. I bled profusely and needed stitches. Some kids had tied a rope to it and got it into the tree, then let go of the rope. I remember my aunt panicking as she saw it happen. Story 44. One night many years ago, I was asleep in my bed when I was startled awake by something. I had the eerie sensation that someone was sitting on the edge of my bed, looking straight at me. I sat up, staring ahead at whatever it was, but there was nothing there. I realized I couldn't move my feet or my blanket, as if someone's full body weight was sitting on them. I recoiled my feet and tried to yank on my blanket, but it wouldn't budge. I tried repeatedly to pull it up, but it did not move. I was incredibly scared, but also completely mesmerized. My bed was against the corner of the room under the window, and my blind was open, with streetlights shining in enough that I could see perfectly across my whole room. I curled up in the corner of my bed and sat there for hours, staring until the sun started coming up. I eventually fell back asleep and woke up when it was morning. When I woke up, I pulled my blanket, and it lifted like normal. I didn't have any pets at the time, and there was nothing on the floor around my bed that could have caused it. My bedroom door was closed, and the only other people in the house were my parents. I was fully awake. This was my childhood home. Nothing like that had happened before or since. Completely weird, completely unexplainable. Story 45. I once had a dream about a place I had never been to, and months later, I found myself standing in that exact spot, down to the smallest details. Story 46. I went to a theme park 4 hours away with some friends. When we got out of the car, I made sure the driver locked the doors since we were leaving our belongings inside. The driver took the keys out of the ignition, put them in his pocket, and locked the doors before we entered the park. About an hour later, after riding several attractions, we all sat down to have lunch. The driver reached into his pocket for money and noticed the keys were gone. We panicked because we were teenagers and far from home, making it difficult to call someone for a ride. We returned to the car and found only the driver's side front door unlocked, with the keys in the ignition. Nothing was missing. Story 47. The weirdest and strangest thing to happen to me lately was this. I was brushing my teeth in my small bachelor suite, and the bathroom door is right beside the main door to the house. I saw in the bathroom mirror the front door knob twisting. Someone was trying to enter my house. They tried many times, then it became aggressive, hitting and slamming something against the door for a good minute. It grew quiet for about 1 to 1.5 minutes. Then they knocked on the door lightly and then again very hard shortly after. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, I opened the door, and it was the most eerie thing I had ever experienced. Nothing had changed except the road that ran by my house was unusually quiet. It hadn't been that quiet since it was around 8 p.m. It's only like that at 1 a.m. or later. I closed the door, locked it, tried wedging a chair against it, and slept with a weapon that evening. It doesn't help that my backyard is known for high drug activity, so anything could have been happening outside my door. I was especially worried when only 3 days later, a gift I had given to an ex, who I hadn't seen in a long time, was left at my door. Was it her who was trying to enter my home by force? I doubt it unless she was very out of character and on drugs. I don't think she would have shaken my door so aggressively or tried to enter without permission or knocking. I was genuinely prepared to fight for my life. Thankfully, I only have one window and I'm on the second floor, so it's unlikely they would have gotten in that way. This occurred just days before my apartment installed cameras in the walkways. The halls leading to the doors of apartment suites are technically outdoors and not blocked by a door inside the building, so it could have been anyone at my door. This made me think it might have been someone who knew the cameras were going to be placed, someone who lived in the building. I never figured out what it was or who was there. I just know that it must have been with bad intentions, as nobody would try to quietly enter my home and then become aggressive shortly after. The knocking softly and then aggressively also confused and scared me. I was ready to be part of a fighting story if I won, or end up as a victim in a true crime story. Story 48. One time, my best friend was telling me about the house she grew up in. Before she even started describing the interior, I already knew how the house looked in great detail. I began describing it to her as if I had been there 1,000 times, and she just sat there with her mouth wide open. I have no idea how I knew this, and it has never happened again. Maybe I had been there in another timeline or have an exceptionally strong bond with her that goes beyond this world. Story 49. Sometimes when I'm very tired, I enter dream states where I can see through my closed eyelids, and it is often quite accurate to what is actually in front of me. Story 50. This happens to me weekly. Before putting my phone down, I always check the time. When I finish what I'm doing, I check my phone again, and it shows the same time as when I put it down. It's not a phone problem because I've tried it with different devices, and it always happens. Story 51. I will share my story again. At the time of this story, I was about 19 years old. I lived in a generic duplex and spent most of my time there alone because my dad worked far away most days and did not bother to commute home, as he had a place he could stay. I worked a swing shift and would get off work at midnight each night. I had a habit of going for a long walk, sometimes up to 2 hours after work, enjoying the silence and smoking some marijuana. One night, I followed this routine, got in around 1:30 or 2 a.m., had a bite to eat, and then lay down on the couch to read whatever I was reading at the time. I am not someone who avoids conflict. If I hear something outside my house when there shouldn't be anything, I usually try to be proactive. I would typically head to the kitchen and grab a large knife to hold, and a small knife to tuck in my back pocket just in case trouble was about to happen. However, that night, something very foreign held me back. I was lying on the couch in the living room. Behind the couch was a sliding glass door to the backyard that we did not use, hence the couch blocking it. My head was pointed into a breakfast nook that also had a sliding glass door. My feet were pointed at the wall of the living room that faced our little side yard. This side yard was somewhat landscaped with small rocks. It was not dirt, grass, or paved. It was filled with little 1-inch rocks until you reached the back patio. This is relevant. The gate from the front walkway to the side yard was broken. Since we couldn't latch it, my dad and I, being resourceful and lazy men, opted to block it closed with a large trash can. We did not bother to put the lid on it, and it had rained recently, so it was brimmed with water. I had tried moving it myself not long before this, but it was too heavy unless I tipped and dumped it, which I did not do. This too is relevant. The side gate led out to a front walkway. This was a duplex, so we were close together. The neighbor to our left, whose house my feet were pointed at, had their front door not more than 20 feet from ours. On the front side of the gate, there was a small concrete walkway that came off the main walkway leading to the door, and this walkway led you to the gate. Between our walkway and the neighboring walkway were some bushes, not sure what kind. I promise this is all about to become relevant. I was lying on the couch when I thought I heard a sound. At this point, I should have been up and moving to the kitchen, but I didn't. I just kept listening, as our walls were paper thin. After a couple of seconds, I was certain I heard something rustling the bushes in front of the house. It grew louder, then paused when I was pretty sure it was near the door, yet I still didn't move. In fact, I just shut my eyes and laid my book on my chest. I should have bolted at the next sound I heard. It was best described as a grinding noise. It only took me half a second to realize that it was the sound of the gate being pushed open and the water-filled trash can moving through the rocks in the side yard. This sound did not sound like a struggle. It was abrupt and fast, like whatever was pushing the gate open did not find it a challenge. It was followed by more sounds. First, there were smaller crunches from the side yard. Then I distinctly heard footsteps, slapping steps, like from a bare foot, on the patio behind me. By this point, my heart was racing, but I still didn't move. I wanted to react, and I still feel I could have, but there was an incredible impulse telling me not to. I found myself repeating, "Just keep your eyes closed, and they'll go away. Keep your eyes closed, and they'll go away." Now, the strangest part and the hardest to describe. I was lying back on a sofa with cushioned arms, my neck resting against one. My body was tilted a bit to the right, with my right arm touching the cushion beneath me. My left arm was jammed against the back of the sofa. Under me, there was a small area beneath my left shoulder blade that was touching nothing, but this little empty pocket was surrounded by my body and the couch. Nonetheless, as I lay there reciting my panicked mantra, I felt something touch my back. It touched me right on the left shoulder blade, as if it were reaching through the couch, and rolled along my back like a massage ball. It was an extremely odd sensation, but still, I continued to tell myself, "Keep your eyes closed, and they'll go away." The next thing I knew, it was 6:30 a.m., and I opened my eyes to the sun shining. I didn't feel like I had slept, just that I had chosen to open my eyes. I was groggy, though. Without much thought, I ambled up to my bedroom to get a few more hours of sleep. When I woke up later that day, I checked the side yard. The gate had been pushed open, the rocks were disturbed, as were the plants out front. I have no idea what any of this really means. I will just add that I have other memories, mostly fragmentary, from my younger years that I also cannot explain. I have been oddly fixated and terrified by aliens since a young age. We had a dog when I was young who had a deformed throat, so when he breathed, he made a snorting sound that frightened me. He would come into my room while I slept, jump on the bed, and start snoring loudly. I'd inevitably wake up, and even though it happened frequently, my first thought would not be, "Oh, the dog is snoring again." Instead, it would be, "Oh God, they're back." At that point, I would go completely still, keep my eyes closed, and repeat to myself, "If I keep my eyes closed, they'll go away. If I just keep my eyes closed, they'll go away." Life is strange, and strange things happen. We can't explain it all. I know I wasn't asleep, though. I know something was there. I just have no clue what, why, or how. Story 52. I had a dream that terrified me. Everything was black, but I could see a small light in the distance. Then, I heard a female voice shouting my name, and I woke up immediately feeling terrified. Maybe I had stopped breathing during sleep, and someone saved my life? I don't know. Story 53. My wife and I both saw a dreamlike cat leap into the corner of our room. It didn't look like a real cat, and of course nothing was there when I got up to look. I am skeptical about anything spiritual, so I just accept it. It wasn't a scary experience. In fact, it was calming. Story 54. The weirdest thing that happened to me was when I was 12, and my best friend and I thought of the exact same obscure song simultaneously. She started humming it just as I was about to. We hadn't heard it in years. Sometimes I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Another strange moment was when my childhood stuffed bunny mysteriously reappeared in my college dorm after being lost for years. I still can't explain that one. Story 55. Chilling sensation. I know it's my brain playing tricks on me. I usually stay up late, but sometimes it gets so noticeable that, out of some instinct, I lock my door, which I usually never do. Story 56. For the past few weeks, I have experienced a strange sensation of not being able to see, even though I could clearly see. I had to stop driving. Story 57. I saw a man in all black staring at me from across a small field. I turned to yell for my friends, and when I looked back, he was gone. Story 58. Everyone else may not find this strange, and there might be an explanation, but I've been pondering it for 13 years without a resolution. I attended an In Flames concert and remained completely sober throughout the night with no alcohol or drugs. The next morning, I discovered a jester head pick in my pocket. I had never seen anyone throw picks into the audience, and I didn't notice how it ended up in my pocket until that moment. Story 59. I saw my grandma as an angel minutes after she died in the hospital. She told me I am special and meant to help people. I have also seen approximately 40 unidentified flying objects myself and have lost half a dozen friends because they couldn't handle how often we see them. Story 60. This is kind of random, but once I was choosing what to eat for lunch, so I visited 3 restaurants, all of which were closed for some reason. I decided to change plans and go to my favorite restaurant, where I have been eating since first grade. I hadn't planned on going until the start of next month when I got back from my travels, but I got the last table. After I finished, they informed me that the restaurant would close at the end of the month. They hadn't put up any notice, so I would have returned from my trip and found it closed. Because of a hurricane right before my trip, I never got to eat there again. But I did get that one last time. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.